I heard the cry at a red light, thin and torn by the wind, and if I'd blinked, I would have missed it. You know what I mean? The kind of sound that reaches past your coat and grabs your ribs like a hand. So I cut the engine on Millstone Bridge and followed it down the icy embankment. Dress shoes, sliding cold, burning my ears, and under the concrete arch, I saw a 7-year-old girl on a piece of cardboard, with a newborn tucked under her jacket, like a tiny furnace that couldn't keep up her eyes too old, her jaw set like she'd been negotiating with the world since breakfast. I said my name was Cole, and it sounded dumb bouncing off the pillar, so I added quick, "I'm not here to take you anywhere. I'm here to help." And the girl said, "Please don't let them split us up," which is the truest way I've ever heard a person say, family, no legal words, just that one plea. And I wrapped my coat around both of them and felt the baby sigh against my chest, like a match finding oxygen. And we moved as one shaky little caravan up the hill, Rosie in my arms, Ava glued to my sleeve into the car where the heater tried and mostly failed. And we drove to St. Margaret's because my feet knew the way from a lifetime that ended 2 years ago when the monitor in another room went flat and silence became something I could hear. The nurses clocked the situation in one glance and turned into motion warm blankets and soft voices and quick hands, and when they reached for the baby for the routine checks, Ava latched like a magnet, and I said, "I'm right here, I'm not leaving." And she looked at me like maybe I was telling the truth, so Donna, the social worker with the scuffed notebook and kind eyes, asked simple questions, and Ava answered in small pieces. Stepmom said she'd be right back. Stepmom didn't come back, and then the charge nurse asked about a guardian, and my mouth said, "I'll sign," before my brain could write the pros and cons list. I've lived by since middle school, yeah, that happened. And I sat that night in a plastic chair that hates the human spine, watching Ava sleep with her fingers hooked in the bassinet, like she could pin the world to the mattress. And I realized I'd made a promise not to the hospital or the court or the internet, to 2 kids who didn't know my last name. Don't let them split us up. And I knew exactly how far I'd go to keep it. Morning came gray and flat, and the doctor said both girls were stable if someone could watch them at home. And the word home rang like a bell I hadn't heard since Emily died. I signed the discharge and drove to the glass barn on Harbor Ridge that people in Riverport whisper about, at open houses, all windows, and empty echo. And Theo met us at the door with a look that said, "This is a lot even for us," and asked, "Is this wise?" And I said, "Probably not. Is it right? Yeah." And he nodded, because his job description might say assistant, but his real one says mirror. And that first day was awkward in human ways. Eggs, both burnt and raw, a donated bassinet, appearing like a magic trick, Ava sitting at the edge of the chair, like the table might eject her, Rosie sleeping in that jerky newborn way. And then Ava found the piano and tapped middle C once, and the house breathed out for the first time in 2 years. But storms don't stay outside anymore. They come with cameras and captions. And by lunch, there was a doorbell with a lens and a neighbor who wanted a photo for a prayer chain, and a clip online from a midnight formula run that made it look like Ava was stealing all of it, narrated by Pierce Malloy, a suit who feeds on microphones like they're grapes, calling me reckless and unwell. And the stock dipped, and the board called and said, "Cole, we need you to step back." And I looked at Ava's hand on the piano and said, "I'm not stepping back," and hung up. And then stared at my own reflection, thinking about consequences, like a man who usually wins by calculating every one of them. Then Brenda Klein showed up with a clipboard and a smile that never reached her eyes, a director of a group home people whisper about when they think kids aren't listening. And she said, "We had an anonymous tip, the children will be safer in our care until a hearing." And she stepped like she owned the threshold, and I stepped like a man who remembered a promise. "You're not taking them." And she said, "That's not your decision," in a sing-song built from years of winning on technicalities. And thank God Dana pulled up with emergency paperwork and a clock on it that said, "Move fast," because somewhere in that chaos, Ava heard the word orphanage and disappeared, and we found her under the stairs with Rosie in her lap, both shaking, and I sat on the floor with them and said, "This is your home. No one is taking you while I'm alive." And if that sounds dramatic to you, maybe you've never had a child put their whole weight on your words. I tried to get ahead of it, posted a simple video, said I found 2 kids in a snowstorm, and brought them home. If that's a crime, then judge me. And the thing went everywhere, casseroles and rocks, literally a rock through the laundry window, with a note that said, "Monster, send them away or else." And the next day, 2 officers came for a welfare check, and when one reached for Rosie, Ava broke in a way that made something in me stand up and take the wheel. And I said, "We do this in the living room, with all of us together." And they agreed, because decent people can still read a room. And that night, Ava handed me a drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a big rectangle with too many windows and a potato-shaped dog. And on the back, she had written our family in letters that leaned all over the place. And I swear to you, I've signed merger agreements with less weight in my chest. The hearing came fast, because someone wanted it fast, and the courthouse smelled like hairspray and coffee cameras everywhere. Judge Whitcomb looking like a bust that could blink Brenda in the back like a hawk who hasn't eaten Malloy, pacing, like he learned law from TV, and he ran the edited store clip and said reckless and unstable widower and waited for me to explode, but I didn't. I kept my hand on the bench where Ava sat and let Dana go first, just the facts. Ava steadies with coal. Rosie's weight is up, the home checks out. Then they called Ava and watching a 7-year-old climb a chair to reach a microphone, while grown men in $1,000 shoes whisper, "We'll make you hate and love this country." At the same time, the judge asked, "Do you know why you're here?" And she said, "Because someone said, I'm not safe, and are you safe with Mr. Harrington?" And she nodded and said, "He found us, he didn't leave." And the room went quiet in that church way, even for people who don't pray. That's when the twist landed. Theo's friend Nate walked in with a tablet and a chain of custody like a seatbelt, and showed the judge parking lot footage of Brenda meeting Ava's stepmother, emails about payments, metadata that proved the shoplifting clip was doctored for clicks, dates, amounts, the whole ugly tree, and you could see it hit the room like a cold front. And the judge granted me temporary custody pending the investigation, and Ava launched into my arms so fast I didn't remember standing, just the weight of a kid who finally let her body believe her heart. After that, the machine moved the way a machine can, when someone finally flips the switch charges against the stepmom for endangerment. Brenda's home shuttered Malloy in trouble with his bar, and inside our house life got loud. In good ways, pancakes that didn't poison anyone, chopsticks on the piano, Rosie's laugh like a squeaky toy, and the board learned the company doesn't crater when a CEO grows a spine, which is funny if you like irony. The final hearing was smaller but heavier, fewer cameras, more truth, and the judge asked me why adoption, not guardianship, why the whole thing, and I told him the truth I had been circling since the red light. That a man people saw as a headline and a bank account and a name on a truck line had been frozen by grief, and distance felt like safety until 2 kids under a bridge made a promise in me louder than fear. And paperwork makes you responsible, but love makes you family, and the law should catch up to what our life already knows. I want to be their dad, and he nodded and read the order. Adoption approved. Effective immediately, and Ava squeezed my hand and said, "Dad," almost a breath more than a word, and it rearranged furniture I didn't know could move. We didn't throw a gala. We ate pizza on paper plates and laughed the way people laugh when something heavy finally sets down. And later I watched my daughters sleep and tried that sentence on in my head, again and again. until it fit like a jacket I thought I'd never wear. If you want the postcard ending here, it is months later. We stood back on Millstone Bridge, Ava, in a blue dress, rosy with a bow crooked on her head, and we tucked a single wildflower into a crack in the concrete and listened to the river that used to sound like threat and now just sounded like water. And Ava said, "Thank you for stopping." And I didn't say you saved me more, because some truths don't need decoration. I just nodded and let the wind take the rest. Now here's the part people argue about. And I want you to argue with me. Do it in good faith, but do it loud, because we call it compassion. When a CEO does it on camera, and a crime when a scared kid holds formula in a grocery aisle. We say men shouldn't cry, and then wonder why nobody stops at red lights to listen. We build systems to help and let them calcify until a 7-year-old has to learn the language of self-defense. So, tell me, was I right? Was I reckless? Did I use what I had the right way, or did my privilege push someone out of the frame? Have you seen the system protect or punish? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me your story or the one you witnessed. And if you believe promises still matter and families can be chosen, hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs a reason to stop at the next red light. And let's talk about what justice looks like when the camera isn't rolling.